what I've come to appreciate and what I want to impart to people is that you're being creative when you're cooking. You're being creative when you're making decisions what you have to wear. You're being creative when you're trying to figure out how to hack something because you don't have the parts that you have when you're at home.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Shine a Light. This is your host, Christine Miles. It's great to be here with Leslie Grandy. Nice to see you, Leslie.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, as I always say, I like to talk about you before I talk with you. So let me start by introducing your background a little bit to my audience, and then let's dive in and just have a conversation. So I'm really thrilled that you're here. So I love what you say. You say most organizations wait for aha moments. Frankly, I think people do too, but we'll talk more about that. Or rely on a few creative people to drive innovation, but that's not a strategy, it's just a hope. So you're the author of the award-winning book, Creating Velocity. I want to talk more about that. You help corporate leaders shift from optimizing to reimagining by asking, what if? To move beyond the small improvements toward unexpected breakthroughs, replacing a little better with completely different. Creativity should be an organizational skill, not limited to a single department. It's a strategic skill that drives every breakthrough in business, from product innovation to risk management to operational transformation. Wow, that's powerful. And I'm a believer already. So, so tell us more. Why this? Like, how did this
Sure.
become your superpower?
Well, I think I started, my story starts when I was young, and I really remember very vividly wanting to be a creative person, wanted to be seen as a creative person.
Like how
Uh,
young? Just let me slow you
I
down there.
remember, I'm going to say elementary school when my parents put me in piano lessons. Like, I remember having really wonderfully supportive parents in terms of wanting to support my desire to be artistic. My mother was a painter, but she was by profession an English professor at a university level. My
I just
father
have to
was
stop you for a second, because when you said bi, I thought you were going to say bipolar, because that's where I come from. So I just digress for a moment. I don't know if anybody else had. So she was, say that again. I totally lost my way because you said bi. Your mother was
an artist,
an
but by
artist
profession,
by profession.
by profession,
Much better story, Leslie. I like it
thank you.
already.
She was an English and journalism professor at Villanova University, and
Oh,
so
in
very
my
well.
backyard.
Yep, I grew up in outside of Philadelphia,
Okay.
and my father was a general practitioner and had a thriving practice, but also was a piano player who couldn't read music but could play anything he could hear.
Wow, my dream.
And so he loved the opera and ballet and the symphony. And my mother would take me to art school at the Philadelphia Art Institute and all the places that they could get me to expose my artistic talent. But I just was bad at everything. I was bad at every lesson. In fact, I remember my piano teacher telling my mom, "You should stop throwing good money after bad. This is never going
Wow.
anywhere." And
Wow.
they put me in drama lessons. My mother was getting her master's at the University of London, and she put me in drama school in England. And because my American accent, they had me perform as a tree in a black leotard in the final
Wow.
project.
That's rough.
So I was never the creative artist that I wanted to be. And I was great at science and math, but that didn't scratch the itch for me. That's not what I
Well, it's
wanted
not
to
where you
be.
came from, was it? It wasn't what you were ordained in some ways to be. Yeah.
Yeah, very academic and scientific, and all of that was part of what I was good at, but not what I enjoyed.
Okay.
So I went to a school where I had an independent study project, and I made a film that won a public television award. And so I thought to myself, aha,
Now, how old are
I
you at
found
this
my
point?
talent.
How old are you at this
I
point?
was in 11th grade, so I would have been
Wow.
about 16.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, this is the world telling me this is what you're good at. Go ahead and pursue this.
Okay.
So I wanted to be a film major, wanted to go to California, but my parents wouldn't let me. So I ended up going to Northwestern because my father wanted me to have a good education and they had a film program. So it was a compromise. But then I moved to Los Angeles afterwards, and I got work in the film industry, but not in a creative role.
You were the tree
So
again.
yeah, I was working in the background, helping directors and producers make the film, but not the designer or the stylist or the camera person. And during that period of time, I realized my superpower was actually figuring things out.
Ah, interesting.
And that not so much about design or art, but in solving problems that were coming out of the director's imagination. I want to film on the Foothill Expressway. We don't have a permit. I just need to get this one shot. Can you figure out how we can do that? I need a aerial shot of a nuclear sub traversing the Hood Canal. And of course, the Navy doesn't publish that schedule. Help me figure out how to do that.
Wow. Why did they come to you?
Because I always believed that I could figure things out. That was the superpower that I didn't realize was really my creative skill. That I could find a way forward when I didn't know the path, that I understood that the ambiguity I had with the problem wasn't a hurdle as much as part of my process to figure it out.
Okay.
And so I always knew that if I could do that, I would get hired. That every producer or director would want somebody on their team who just said, I have never done this before, but I know I can figure it out.
And
And
who
it kept
doesn't
me
want that
working,
person on their team, right?
right? Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And so I got lots of work. I never was unemployed. I made it into the Directors Guild in 3 years.
Wow.
And I realized that I had sort of discounted that as a creative skill. And that moment of recognizing that was my differentiator, that was my art form, that you give me something I haven't seen before, and I believe in my capacity to figure it out, was something that I really leveraged into business when I ended up getting my MBA and then starting my second career in the technology industry. The world where figuring things out was highly valued.
Yeah, it still is.
Right. And so that was the moment when I recognized that people need to know they have the capacity to be creative, but not in the way that we all think it is, that it's a talent or an art form.
Yeah,
This
I
is a
love
long
that
way
you
around to your question of
well,
how did I find that was my superpower, but I was looking in the wrong place for it.
well, first of all, it's I love that you went back to the beginning because as I've said before to my audience and to my listeners, that we all have a story. It starts young. We don't necessarily know how to tap into it, but if we look and we lens back to our early childhood, a lot of why we do what we do shows up very early. I'm as I joked about the bipolar, and thank you for indulging me on that. Uh, I was as I was listening, I thought your life sounds very charmed in a way, and I don't mean that. I mean
No,
just
it was.
parents.
I
You know,
luxuriated in parents who wanted me to be educated and culturally stimulated.
yeah. So I was relieved that you had some trauma and that you failed at being creative. Thank you for helping those of us who come from early childhood trauma and turn that into their gift as at least something. But I also think that's also interesting because really, I'm teasing, of course, but that you had these very creative parents, and you're just and these look. My dream is to not because I'm dyslexic that I not to have to read music because it's such torture. I can't do it easily. So your father is my dream come true. Let me just sit down and play. I don't need to, and he probably wants the opposite. But I'm imagining what the failure of that felt like a little bit when all you wanted to do was create. So there's a little bit of lesson in through failure comes some amazing gift, even if it's not the kind of big failures that we often think about.
Well, I love that you say it that way too, because when I look back on it now, I see the persistence through all of those failures as being easy to give up on myself, but that I got closer adjacent to creative people in the film industry allowed me to find my zone, right?
Yeah,
My
and you stuck
identify
with
my
it.
superpower. So I think in that scenario, all of that failure made it so that I didn't fear it, right? I was able to just keep trying something else to get close to it. And
Which
I
is how
think
you
that,
solve problems too, right? Difficult
right,
problems and create, don't you?
right. And but so I think the way that you just framed it though is really, I think, the underlying thing I try to teach as well now, which is I don't have a fear of failure. I accept it's a possibility. When I moved to California and worked in the film industry, my parents didn't think it was a good idea. They gave me a check for $500 and said, "We've done our job. Good luck. Like, we got you here." And they said, "This isn't going to work." And all I said to myself was, "I can't fail." So that persistence through all that poor art allowed me to have the belief that I wouldn't fail at this because I could keep going. And I think that's a thing that people give up too early on themselves. Those failures are somehow defining rather
Well, they're
than propelling.
painful. They're
Yeah,
really
and they don't
painful, aren't
propel
they?
you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, l- as someone who there's my nieces are incredibly creative. They can draw, they can do all, and I that just skipped this. I mean, I have other creative ways. I paint pictures in my mind, but if I have to physically put that in the world, and there's a lot of fear around, you don't want to play Pictionary with me. It locks me up because I'm not able to to take, and draw something on paper and
Right.
articulate, and it's very frustrating. So I'm imagining in the creative process that you're teaching, a lot of people feel locked up like that because they don't know how to
Absolutely.
express it, right?
And I think that the expression is the whole thing. That's the whole thing. I was looking for an expression in mediums that weren't mine, like you were just saying. Drawing isn't your medium. And I think we get limited in believing, as you did, that being artistic or creative has to have a medium that we traditionally think is art,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
no, for sure, for sure.
And I think what I've come to appreciate and what I want to impart to people is that you're being creative when you're cooking. You're being creative when you're making decisions what you have to wear. You're being creative when you're trying to figure out how to hack something because you
Yeah,
don't have the parts that you have
yeah. So,
when you're
how
at
does
home.
that?
And so now you have to do this when you're on the road. And now what do I do?
Right. We're all MacGyver, to use an
Right.
old reference,
There you
right?
go.
Yeah. So help take us into the world of organizations. And I say, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but so what? So what? I'm not creative at work. So what? Why do I need to be creative? Why can't that go to a department? Why does it have to be all of us?
I love this question so much, Christine, because I think that is the hurdle that I encounter all the time. I'm a project manager or I'm an operations expert, but problems occur in different stages, right, of the life cycle of an idea. So a problem that you might have when you're scaling an idea might be different than a problem that you have when you're conceptualizing an idea. And so being able to move around with levels of ambiguity or levels of available data or work within constraints, everybody has to do that. That isn't about making innovations necessarily, but about dealing with less than you want to get what you need. And so being creative gives you that confidence that when you have those constraints, you might be able to figure out how to get there.
Sorry. So I'm just, again, I'm stuck a little bit. So how is that different than just like just doing my job and doing regular problem solving? What's the difference between, okay, here's a problem I'm stuck with, and why is that different than me being able to really take my creativity to another level? Is it that I can solve bigger problems? Is it that I can solve them
Oh, great.
faster?
Sorry, I misunderstood. Now I totally appreciate the clarification. The issue, I think, when you don't have this capacity to creatively address a problem, there's three things that I think are likely to happen. One is you're going to go to default to old ways, and that may or may not apply in new circumstances or new contexts or new competitors or new customer segments, right? So being able to expand from your status quo thinking is the first thing. And companies don't grow fast enough when they rely on status quo thinking. So that's why it's a problem in any function. Is if everybody thinks a certain way, you might not come up with a new business model that would differentiate you, right? So status quo thinking is really limiting. The second is expert thinking. We think that the people who know deeply about a topic know everything about a topic, but then that limits your exploration around areas that may not look on the face as being relevant to the problem. And a great example here that I think about is we all think ATMs work a certain way because that's how they were built. But I did a session with people at JP Morgan Chase, and I said, I hate my PIN number gets stolen. What can you do about that?
You hate what? Say that again?
That my PIN number for my debit card can get stolen. A skimmer reads it or somebody looks over my shoulder. What could you do to fix that so I don't have to worry that I don't remember my PIN or it gets stolen? And then all of a sudden, they started exploring what things could be done because they just tested the assumption that this is the way it has to be done. But also, as experts, they know security. What other things could they bring to bear to this situation and context? What analogies do they know? What are the things that could be used that aren't being used? And what would the benefit for the trade-off be for the investment in making that change, right? So asking people to think outside of their expertise brought all sorts of interesting ideas to the
Well, I
table,
always
right?
say the more knowledge and experience you have, the more you're going to rush to solving the problem. And that doesn't
Totally.
mean you're going to solve the problem the right way.
And that's the third point is I think that people tend to opt for speed, which is where generative AI is really doing people a disservice because it gives them an answer, but it may not give them the best answer. And unless they have confidence enough in their creative ability to challenge that answer, they may actually perpetrate something that's meh, that's kind of okay, it'll work, but it won't necessarily be demonstratively better.
Well, I think that's so true, even using that as an editing tool. I think it's, it can sound very redundant, it can sound very bland, it can sound very qualified, and we lose the real human element of what makes
Right.
it special and different, right?
Right. And that's where people having creative self confidence, the capacity to solve problems, and creative agency, the ownership over the output, whatever that is, to make sure it has meaning and purpose and value, that only comes if people see themselves as creative. If they have a creative identity that they can say, yes, I can make this better. It was a good starting point from AI, not the finish point.
So let me take the lens to a different audience, which is everyone, pretty much. So I'm thinking about your childhood and how you were kind of like you're creative, right? And you're like, I know I'm creative; it's in there somewhere. But nobody was looking at Christine at that young age, going, she's creative in the traditional ways. So, how do we, as parents, let's talk to parents. How do you breed this? How do you use what you've do with creative velocity and with organizations to build this muscle young? Like what?
I love
Yeah.
this. I think one of the key elements of a creative mindset, which I think is hard for us to see as adults, but is the thing you need to nurture in children, is the playfulness aspect of it, the willingness to do improv, to think and imagine what if something happened, right? What if this car could fly? Right. What would the story be then? Right. Because now all of a sudden you start going beyond, the way people see a fixed state as a child, like this is a car, it rides on wheels. Well, what if it actually flew? What would have to change? And so as you
So
teach
color
children
outside
the
the lines.
permission, they have, right, they give that there is a permission to be imaginative, right? And to improvise on what things are used for. They will be more free to do that as an adult. But so many times we're thought this is the way this was built to be used for this, and we don't
Yeah.
repurpose it for
Don't do
something
that.
else. So we get static in our thinking. And so the more that adults can encourage that type of playfulness, that type of sort of uh, improvisational thinking, story thinking, the more comfortable people will be that the boundaries aren't firm and hard.
I think that's I think that's really helpful because and we need to certainly affirm kids. I'm all for that. But I think sometimes we think we just need to tell them they're creative. But what you're describing or congratulate them for being creative. But what you're describing is no, there's an actual how to this, and that is expand their imagination and actually get them to find different uses for things rather than just what's in front of them. That's a very different approach than you're great at this, or that's wonderful, or what a great drawing. Like, that's really not as specific. And I think whether you're a leader or you're a parent, that's the difference, isn't it? It's the
Totally.
questions we're guiding them towards, not just congratulating them for how they're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why the original MacGyver lasted so long on TV, because I think it demonstrated people's capacity not just to survive, but to imagine an outcome that's different than the one that was obvious at that moment. And I think that people were rooting for that solution to come out of him and then to say, "Oh, I see. He saw this in such a different dimension than I was seeing the problem he got himself stuck in." And so those of us who were raised on that original MacGyver approach appreciate that sense of, what do I have here to work with? I'm in a pickle. I have constraints. What can I do to make something happen? And we all see that now as a skill, right? As a real skill. If you could do that, if you're on a hike and you twist your ankle and you need to get down the hill, what can you use as a splint? Is a real problem, right? And when I think about, all the road trips I've taken and the thing I didn't pack that I had to figure out what to do now that I need it, right?
Yeah.
I recognize I think like MacGyver in that moment. What do I have? I start taking things out of the bag. I start seeing what things I can use and how I can manifest a solution.
Yeah, and that's in everyday life, isn't it? That we it's easy not to build that muscle these days, isn't it? Like, we
Yeah.
don't, let's all Google it. And believe me, I'm thrilled, like, in so many that there's
Well, do you
that.
use generative AI for anything, personal or professional, that, to get more than just an answer, or like a search engine? Do you use it in any creative
I
way?
use it mostly as an editing tool. I find that it's not a great starting point for me, but what I will do is I will use it as to ask it questions, and then when it feeds something back to me, I'm like, I don't think that sounds like me, or I don't like that, or so you have a book, I wrote a book. I Part of me is like, I'm really glad I didn't have this when I wrote my book, because I think it would have helped, and it could have ultimately hindered me, because I think I
That's
would
so
have.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
really
don't know, and
fascinating.
I've talked to other. I mean, from an efficiency standpoint, from the rote mundane things, it's incredible coming up with tables and things like that. But from a true creative process, I think it scrubs so much out that I don't find it particularly. I don't like it. But as an editing tool, because I write like Yoda, my English is is like reversed and so forth. I find it remarkable, and I also know that, like anything in life, it's the quality of questions you ask it, not in order to get a good answer, you better ask it a pretty quality question. And I don't know that, you know.
There's two things that you said I want to just hook onto. One is, that's one of the reasons I teach these structured frameworks, because they give you the quality way to begin an interaction where you're exploring a problem space or an idea that you haven't fully formed. And that way you're really supporting yourself through that investigation, and making sure that it's not wandering aimlessly through the, language model to give you all sorts of random content back, right? You're
Yeah.
keeping
Can you give us
yourself
an
kind of on
example of
point.
that?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a methodology called SCAMPER. It was developed by one of the founders of the ad agency BBDO from back in the Mad Men days. And basically, it's 7 moves that you can make to make a difference in the outcome of a problem that you have. So it's substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, or reverse. And so if you're asking a question about an existing problem, what might I substitute to make this more affordable or sustainable? What could I eliminate to drive the costs down and actually advantage my customers? So now you're framing a question to get an answer back that's very on point to the problem that you have, but it's open ended because it'll come up with maybe 4 or 5 ideas. And so then you'll say through that process, these seem like they are less interesting because of this. Can we look in another domain for something that might be similar that you could substitute? Right. And so now you're coaching AI to navigate the problem space with you. So you don't have to like the answers. Sometimes when I use AI, I'll say, how did you get that answer? Why is that the answer? Why didn't you think of this? As an example, I ran through this debit card PIN problem as an AI problem because I was doing this in a course, a workshop with JP Morgan Chase, and I said, "Why didn't you think of this?" And they're like, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." Because it's optimizing for speed, it got 4 answers. It started writing the answers.
Huh. Well, first of all, these are good questions in conversations, whether you're talking to AI or another human,
Right,
right?
right,
So,
right. They're frameworks
so
you can use with or without AI.
yeah, but I think, look, this is so practical in terms of challenging the status quo, which is what you're about, which so if we take the status quo and we don't dig further, we're going to get a status quo answer, and whether it's
Exactly.
AI or not, right?
Right.
So I think it to me, this is about peeling the onion back and going, how do we find the deeper layers of things? And that's really where the magic happens, because I believe the answers are within.
Yeah, the exploration, like you say, is the exercise, right? Not speed to answer.
Yeah, yeah, but speed to answers is where we're living and breathing a lot, isn't it? But what's it costing?
Yeah, it's costing a couple of things. One is accuracy. As I was writing the book, I put some of the exercises into AI because I figured some readers would, and I wanted to see how AI did it. And one was a logic puzzle, and it had 15 facts, and you had to determine who lived in the red house was the question, but you had all these facts. And so what AI did was it decided that it could come up with an answer after just reading 12 facts, and it gave me the wrong answer because it got to an answer quickly. And so I said, "Why did you eliminate these other 3 facts?" And it's because I didn't explicitly tell it to use every fact.
Wow, wow.
I didn't tell it to because I just had assumed if I presented 15 facts, it would be presumed to be all relevant.
Right. Yeah, sometimes I'm arguing with it, like, why, you only did this, why? So it's like, please, I'm saying please because I want the AI to like
I
me.
know. I do that too. Oh my god, it took me a year to break that habit, I think. Oh my
I'm
gosh,
so polite.
me too.
We're,
Because it's
we're
so
women.
anthropomorphized, you think it's a person.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it just also just seems like the way we should interact,
Yeah,
so why not, right? Wouldn't
absolutely.
it be nice if that was just the way we all interacted with
Absolutely.
that demeanor? So, that's fascinating. So be careful. So, we don't wanna substitute our creativity is what you're saying. We wanna use our
Right.
creativity as the guide to the AI, not let the AI guide us.
Exactly. And I think that comes with that creative agency, that belief that you can have that type of reaction, that you can push back, that you can say, wait, that's not the answer. I wrote this puzzle. Why the right answer is this. And for it to say, oh, you're right. If I used all the facts, that would be the right answer. And so now I feel more like I'm a partner rather than a receiver of inputs and outputs.
Yeah. I love that you say creativity is a skill, because I think that is so demystifying. And when I was married, my ex is an engineer, and he's very, very, like, intellectually super bright. And we would play. I forget. I think it was called Abalone. It was this marbles game, and I was like, "You're gonna win every time because I can do 3 moves and you can do 7." Like, that was just how it was. And part of it was because he was trained as an engineer, and his logical brain had 7 ideas. Like, I can unplug the computer and plug it back in. I got like 3 answers and I'm out, right? So, but even though that may not be as where I feel naturally inclined, the reality is I can skill build to at least 5, probably, if not
Yeah.
7, right?
Yeah.
It's so it's just what we're comfortable in. It's what we're used to defining ourselves as. I could, believe me, I could beat him at most things, and he would be the first to admit that. So this one really was like, But you got 7 moves. I don't have that. But it is a skill. Even that's a skill, isn't it? Because that's part of creative thinking as well.
Yeah, I think having the practices that can help activate that are really what's important. And I think that we sometimes think it's either there or it's not there, and that we don't have to activate it, or that we don't have to protect it, or that we don't have to build it, right? Like I think when we think of it as talent, we do nothing about it because we think it's a birthright or not. But when we think of it as a skill, and then we know that there are these moves that we can make, or these questions that we can ask, or these approaches that we can take to finding a solution, then all of a sudden you realize it's something you can actually activate and then practice. And so for me, part of my practice, especially when I was working at Amazon and the stress was really high, was to meditate, because that allowed my subconscious to have a way to come out every night. And there's where some of the magic lives, is when the subconscious connects with the conscious. So make right. And so making to your point on your post about a New Year's resolution, that was 5 minutes every night where I would do breathing to focus on something other than my to-do list.
Yeah, it's hard. And small things make a big difference.
It does, and it does give you room and space then to let creativity flourish. That's the important part, is to those 5 minutes like you're talking about could be the habit of meditating, or it could be something completely different, like I take a walk every morning with my dog and I make sure it lasts 5 minutes and I do nothing other than be present with my dog.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty sure I should fact check this, but I'm pretty sure that's how EMDR was created. That someone was, the creator was going on a walk and was moving their eyes back and forth, and that spark. I mean, so amazing things happen when we just take a different literal or figurative path, isn't it true? Like things
Absolutely,
happen.
and I think you can actually know what creates that flow for you. Maybe it is walking your dog, maybe it's a hot shower, right? Maybe it's making chocolate chip cookies. Whatever is enough of a task that gets you busy, but lets your mind wander. And then when your mind is wandering, you're able to think about the world in a lot less of a formal fashion. And so connections get made and patterns get recognized. And all of a sudden now that idea pops into your head. That's the aha moment, but you have to give room for that aha moment to come out.
Well, as I've said many times, everything's a sports analogy for me because I have 2 superpowers, and the second is hitting a ball because I'm pretty good at
Oh,
that. But you can't you can't hit a ball when if you're holding a baseball bat where you're clenched tight and you're not relaxed. You gotta swing into the
yeah,
zone and not be so tight. So that's, metaphorically what I'm hearing you say is that we need to relax into this skill. We need to get to the place where we learn how to let that happen, let the swing happen so the creativity flows out of us, whatever form for us that takes.
absolutely. And then we also have to kind of exercise our mind. And so my other thing is I do the New York Times puzzles every morning before I even do email. I do connections and I do spelling bee and Wordle and all of these things, because it makes my mind think about the puzzle and not the 5 things that are waiting for me when I get out of bed.
Well, and just from a mind perspective, how good is that, right?
The
Right?
practice,
I mean,
right?
just from
It's
a
just a
brain, well, the
practice.
practice is building those pathways and what that does from
Yep.
an aging. There's so many elements to that that just makes such a huge difference that you have that discipline. That is discipline, though. That is part of building a skill, though, isn't it? It's the discipline of
Well,
it.
I think you again. That's why your clip resonated with me. It's a habit, right? And instead of making it a painful habit like brushing teeth or eating vegetables was when I was a kid, right? I find some joy in these habits. Like I like the puzzles. I don't find it to be painful. I find some joy in meditation, and so I think that making the habits be somewhat capable of providing you joy or peace, right?
Imagine that,
Is the
right?
one.
Let's just do
Right.
something we like. Why
Yeah,
not?
for
Yeah.
5 minutes, right? That really gives you that sense that you're taking care of yourself, that you're nurturing that capacity to think outside of what your day is going to bring you.
Now, how long does it take you to do the New York Times crossword puzzle? I'm curious because it has to
So
take,
it's the
if
only
you say
puzzle I
5
don't do.
minutes.
No,
Oh,
it's the only
okay.
puzzle I do. I do spelling bee, Wordle, connections. I forget what the other one. Oh, sports connections. I do that one too, just because I like to prove that I pay
Not that you
attention to
get any
sports enough.
money from the app, people, but you're
No, I do
right.
like all of the puzzles except the crossword. I do the mini just because of the time. To your point,
Well, yeah,
it would take me so much more time to get through the crossword that then it would feel more like a chore. And so these are all
yeah.
just sort of quick wins that I can
Yeah,
have.
they're quick hits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I, so as you're talking, part of what I'm trying to kind of remember when I realized I was creative, because I'm not creative in the traditional ways. So,
Right.
and just hopefully this brings shed some light, but I learned I was creative on the sports field because of the way I created play,
Yes.
because
See?
I could see the lines of where the ball should be passed. I could see how to move players out of the way, and I was able to create play that led to scoring. So that, and I could figure out how to break down. I wasn't the fastest or the strongest. I've made that case many times and I could prove it over and over, but I could, because I could read the other person's game, I knew how to catch them.
How'd you
So
figure that
that's
out? That that was your skill? How did you tap into that at that age?
well, first of all, I had amazing coaches that taught me good skills. So this is why I also like, I played any sport, but field hockey was my sport of choice, and I played other sports successfully, but
What
that was the
position
sport
did you
I fell
play?
in love with.
What position did you play?
Well, depends what time in my life. I played everyone up until when I played U.S. level hockey. So I was a back, center, midi, and a forward. So, but what I think, because and this is where I am a fan of not being super talented, and I'll tell you why. Because I wish that I had more natural abilities and gifts. I really, really do, because I've seen, but the blessing that not having that was that I had to figure things out a different way, kind of the way you were describing. So I wasn't the fastest player on the field, but I wanted to be the best player on the field. And so in order to do that, I just had to see things differently to figure it out, because I couldn't beat anybody with speed or strength, but I could outsmart them and I could outfake them, and I could, so that, I think, because I think in pictures, and that's part of what I learned about my creativity, is that I tell stories in my mind. I think this is part of the gift of being on the spectrum of dyslexia, that's how my creativeness expressed itself. And that's when I started to notice that was a superpower, at least on the sports field. Yeah.
That's so awesome. And I do believe in a way that was akin to problem solving because you have an offense and defense of the opposing team what that you're trying to anticipate them like their competitors in business, right? You're having to try to find the path through that gets you the
And
outcome you're looking
weaknesses,
for. Yeah.
and how to draw play, because obviously we know, and now sports are played on turf and there's more predictability. I played hockey. Do you sound, you were from Villanova area? I live in the Philadelphia area, by the way.
Yeah, so I grew up
So
in
I'm,
Conshohocken.
yeah, yeah. Wow,
And
small world.
I went to school in Fort Washington, and I played field hockey, never at the level that you're talking about, but I did
Did you
play
go to
field
Germantown
hockey.
Academy?
I did.
Did were you went to Germantown Academy? That's us. Well, we're gonna have to chat. For those of you listening, Philadelphia, people in Philadelphia. I grew up in Hershey, but I've been in Philadelphia for most of my adult life. People don't only know where you went to college, they know where you went to high school. This is like hometown feeling. So I know many, many, many people at Germantown Academy, because they're both a client and they also implement my listening path program at Germantown Academy. So that's quite a
Awesome.
touch point. So you did play. We probably know quite a few people in common, Leslie. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
position did
and
you play?
I played center half, and,
Okay.
I was fast. That was, so I was also,
Oh,
a center.
I could catch you. Yeah, yeah.
I was definitely fast, but, I played lacrosse as well. That was the other, sort of the
I should
spring
have.
version of field hockey. You would have probably been
Yeah,
great
that
at
was
that
the
too.
Well, I'm tall, and they didn't have that in my high school, and I was a
You'd have
softball
been great if
pitcher,
you're
but I
tall.
missed the I yeah, I probably would have been better at lacrosse, only I have very long arms, so it would have been hard reach. I really played the wrong sport, like, everybody in field hockey was, like, here, and I was, like, up here, and everybody's like, where did she come from?" So, but yeah, problem solving, you have to draw play and do all those things, so
And I think it's
so
also
I always
it's it's being innovative in the field of play as well, right? You can't be predictable
yeah.
or else your opponent is going to know what you're doing. And so being smart about what plays you can run that aren't predictable, that's creative problem solving too. That really is.
Well, this is where skill and building, as you said, it's habit because I had great coaches that taught me stick work in field hockey. I It made it easier for me to create play because I could keep the ball away from people. And when you again, I think sports is a great metaphor for a lot of things. And
Totally.
in terms of what you're describing, in terms of how we build this literal muscle and skill, by first redefining it and breaking the mold of what we think this means to be innovative and creative, recognizing it's all in there, and then it leads to us creatively solving problems in a different way, is a whole reframe for all of us to impact us in business, in life, and certainly in our I think in our children's lives, as we help them in this very tech easy answer world that can get dangerous if we don't want to lose this ability. It's too important to the future.
100% agree. Amen. I feel that people are willing to outsource creativity to AI because of this low self-esteem that they have about their capacity to be creative, or their misunderstanding about what it means to be creative. And that's kind of my mission, right? That's my platform, is to say that we can't do that because there's too much risk in doing that, not only in wrong answers and hallucinations, but also in meaning and purpose and context, and none of which AI really has. Even if it seems like it knows you, it doesn't. It doesn't know my family, my values, my beliefs. And so I need to be able to add that level of agency over that interaction with the machine, but also with my colleagues, for on behalf of my customers. I have to remind that my colleagues that their expertise doesn't trump the customer's need.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is really, really important and timely work that you're doing. So
Thank
you
you.
launched your book in May, you said, right?
Yep, I did. May, yep, May of last year.
Okay, so tell our listeners again about your book, where they can find your book, where they can find you, and how you work with people and organizations.
Oh, thanks. So the book is Creative Velocity: Propelling Breakthrough Ideas in the Age of Generative AI, and it's available on all the platforms that you want, in Kindle and audiobook as well. And the book discusses different techniques, different practices that you can learn to build that creative muscle. And then it includes an interview with a creative thinker in each chapter who inspired me personally. And so the first chapter is actually the MacGyver mindset. And part of the reason that I picked that, not just because of what we talked about in the conversation, but I'm actually friends with people who were responsible for writing the original MacGyver.
Wow, yeah.
And so I asked them, how did they come up with these MacGyverisms? It wasn't the actor, right? Somebody had to write them, somebody
No,
had to
no.
figure it out.
Yeah,
And so I thought that was really interesting to hear about their process of designing
that's
MacGyverisms. But
amazing. That's quite the
yeah, but
inside story there. Cool.
yeah, it was great. And then there was also people that I'd come interactions with at Amazon and at T-Mobile, who I think were very creative leaders and who taught me a lot about being a creative leader. So they're in there as well. And then there's a way to partner with generative AI on each of those techniques, and then some exercises that you can practice on your own to start to get familiar with the technique. So it's a book that people tell me they imagine coming back to because it's not really a linear
It's a
read.
toolkit. It's a
It's a
toolkit.
toolkit.
You gave us the masking tape or the duct tape. Didn't
Yeah,
MacGyver always have duct tape?
exactly. Exactly.
You gotta
And
have the
then
duct tape.
exactly. And so I teach a Maven course on that is sort of a support for the book, where we actually go through real life problems using the techniques in the book to show how they can be applied. And then I do workshops at corporations where teams get together who are really trying to sort of break the status quo or really trying to growth rapidly in a
Yeah,
competitive
get unstuck.
marketplace. Yeah. And so I teach a workshop where I kind of look at their particular group's challenges and the competitive landscape and then pull through those uh, frameworks that will help them as a way to get started in creative problem solving.
So it sounds like, and I don't want to paraphrase this incorrectly, so you please correct me
Sure.
if I do, but
Sure.
this is not just about creativity. It's about how to really use the tool of generative AI in a way that is safe, right?
Right.
As well, and to get really more compelling answers. So many companies are implementing and wondering what to do with generative AI. So this seems like a need. This is a blue ocean for you in terms of the need that organizations have to really understand how to leverage this in a way that makes so much sense. So congratulations on this
Thank
timeliness.
you. Thank you. What I find is that people are focused on efficiency with AI and don't realize the treasure trove it represents in terms of ideation, imagination, and innovation, and how to, like you say, do it responsibly, but also to really amplify the talent that you have in the organization, to actually have the talent not feel threatened by the technology, but to feel elevated by it.
Well, I'm excited to even learn more and to apply the things that you shared here today in my own limited use of this because even that can feel creativity creatively limiting without knowing some of these techniques. So I really appreciate it. Where can people find you, Leslie?
Definitely on LinkedIn, but also on my website at lesliegrandy.com.
LeslieGrandy.com. That says it all. That's pretty straightforward. We can do that. So go get Leslie's book, find her online, reach out to her if you need her help. And thank you so much for being my
I
guest
so
here.
enjoyed this discussion, Christine. Thank you.
Yeah, well, who knew we were practically neighbors for some period of our lives, maybe. So, but I always said I could have been somebody if I went to Germantown Academy, by the way. What a great place. What a hug you get when you go to Germantown. So great place to go to school. So thank you, everyone, my audience, for listening. Thank you for being here, listening to Leslie. Take her tips and ideas, get her book. It will obviously make an impact. And we'll see you next time here on the podcast, Shine a Light.